The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today on the Solar Podcast, reducing the soft costs in solar. My guest today is a repeat guest, Tom Tansy. He is the chairman and the executive director of SunSpec Alliance in California. Welcome back to the show, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Really
Very happy
appreciate
to
you
be
being
here.
here. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I'm painfully aware that solar is too expensive and the Australians and the Germans are beating my pants off. So I don't like that. I don't like losing. And I want to help the United States reduce the soft costs of solar so that we can be more competitive and so that more companies and residents can benefit from solar, which is such a wonderful win-win.
You bet.
So, and just so our listeners know, we're not going to go into any background on you today. SunSpec Alliance is a mover and shaker in the solar industry. Check them out at sunspecalliance.org. And you can also check out the previous episode I recorded with Tom, where he did give some biographical information prior to us diving into that topic, which was cybersecurity and communications. So I'll put that link in the show notes. So Tom, what are we talking about when we talk about reducing the soft costs in solar?
That's a great question because it means a great many different things because of the soft costs tend to be fragmented into some small and some relatively larger pieces. So soft costs refers to anything that's not labor or material that goes into the cost of a system. So that would be selling expense, that would be permitting expense, operational expense, maintenance expense, et cetera, et cetera. So there's quite a stack of them. Probably principal amongst those soft costs still, in terms of the biggest fraction, it ends up being selling expense and finance expense. But then again, there's another 10 topic areas that people might get into that all could do with some improving when it comes to the soft cost stack.
Yeah, and so at a 40,000 foot level,
Mm-hmm.
the word on the street is that we theoretically should be able to reduce soft costs by maybe a third of what they are today. And one of the real pain points that I'm aware of is the permitting process, for example,
Sure.
where uh, authorities having jurisdiction, that's the city or the county or whatever the jurisdiction is that you're working in, may
Mm-hmm.
or may not make it easy for solar installers and residents or commercial facility owners to
Right.
get a solar array, right?
That's
There's a
true.
there's a huge spectrum, of course, in the more mature markets. The AHJs are getting pretty good at this, but there's plenty of pain. I listen to Barry Cinnamon's podcast, for example, and he's always griping about the AHJs and how the utilities make it difficult. And, what we want is pretty much one click permitting
Sure.
and engineering. And I am looking forward to also having Panel Claw back on the show because I know that they're working on permitting and engineering
Mm-hmm.
uh, as a back end software as a service.
Right.
But as far as SunSpec goes, what are the pain points that you guys are trying to address?
Well, sure. I think what you're highlighting here is that there's lots of friction in the system, and yes, AHJ and permitting, inspection, all that stuff, no question, there's issues with that. A lot of these core issues all boil down to the same thing, and that's the lack of data on the particular topic of interest at the time that you need it. And so I'm going to jump back on my issue about the selling and the financing cost, but address it through this question that you have of dealing with AHJs. And so what makes that so difficult? Well, let's take it from the perspective of the prospective buyer here. And so, in whether you're a residential homeowner or commercial building operator, you're dealing with your contractor or with your project developer, and they're asking you all sorts of questions. How much electricity do you use? What's the type of construction of your roof? What jurisdiction do you think that you're in? Where do we have to go get the building permits? These things, oddly, are not clear. and they all take some ability to do some sleuthing around to determine those answers. The time that's spent on determining those answers all represents hard cost to somebody in the system. And little by little, this is what tends to drive these costs up. It's just lack of this data transparency. And so SunSpec, our whole mission in life is to standardize the information associated with distributed energy operations. And so this is a kind of a sweet spot for us. So what are we doing in this area? Uh, quite a few things. I'll highlight an activity called the OrangeButton initiative. This is originally a U.S. Department of Energy initiative. It was funded back in 2016. And we had a major part in establishing this OrangeButton taxonomy of standardized terms. And so we completed that, produced about 4,000 industry-specific terms associated with financing and operating these solar assets, and put that into play. And so today what we're doing to combat soft costs, one particular timely point here is that we're working to deliver a service called an authority having jurisdiction, or AHJ registry. And so what this would allow somebody that's either selling or designing or system proposing one is to pop the customer's address into a web page. That would then look up the geographic coordinates for the authorities having jurisdiction for that area to tell you who's the building code inspector, what utility, who has the fire district responsibility, et cetera. And believe it or not, just that simple act, as are told by people that do this all day long, save about an hour per application. So let's say that you're paying somebody, fully loaded, 35, 40 bucks an hour. That's what it costs to look up that's what is seemingly a very simple piece of information. So huge advantages can be had and efficiencies can be had just on automating small things like that. And so those are the small things we're interested in.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned OrangeButton. And so now that that program is in its fifth year,
Right.
how do EPCs and installers interact with OrangeButton?
Very good question. By engaging with SunSpec, ultimately, this is the answer. So a little bit about that history. So the original funding, I mean, it ran out in 2019. And but during the first round of that, it was a very substantial investment. It was a total of $4 million invested from the DOE. And we collected another close to $4 million in industry cost share. So that means that we had literally hundreds of companies that were working on defining the standard. Well, once we got through with that first round, many of those same companies wanted to take it further and actually deploy it. Now, the number of parties was winnowed down, but it was winnowed down to a few that are building these sort of software solutions. So if you're an EPC or an installer, again, you would contact SunSpec on that. We actually have an operating service now, so that's available to SunSpec members. Now, about how OrangeButton has sustained itself, well, SunSpec, of course, picked this up as a project that we have been supporting through our own membership. We had some additional funding that came in through a collaboration with Sandia, and maybe we'll see some more of that come about. But effectively, it's supported by the community. So between volunteers that are interesting to advance the technology, and then the EPCs and installers and so forth that want to deploy it in their own operations, that presents both a creative impetus here to develop new and better features, but then also we're delivering a solution out of the back end. And it's becoming a pretty substantial group of both solar developers and software developers that are working on this project now. So it's getting better by the day.
And from a practical standpoint, what does if I join the alliance
Sure.
or join the OrangeButton program,
Sure.
what is the benefit to me on a real nuts and bolts level? I'm
Sure.
developing a CNI solar project. Is it Is it going to benefit me in any jurisdiction in the country?
Any jurisdiction in the country. Yeah, it's a database of I believe it's 33,000-ish authorities having jurisdiction, all geolocated. So for those people in the audience that are in this business, it's as simple as going to ahjregistry.sunspec.org. You can go there now and type in the address, city, state, zip code, whatever of the project, and it in it on a Google Map representation, it locates your system so you can make sure you've got the right commercial building or house, and it sends back to you on the screen that list of registries, or excuse me, that list of authorities having jurisdiction that are part of the registry. And so in the time it takes you to enter the address, you get the information back, and then you can fill out the next part of your permit and keep on going. So again, that's the part that what the people that have signed up for the service have told me, that on average they spend an hour trying to figure out, again, if they're dealing with potentially hundreds of applications per month, just sort of getting all the data lined up about the project is a chore.
Yeah. And then, we have to figure out which NEC they're on, which, version of the electric code they're using.
Fire
And
code, etc.
yep,
Which are,
yep.
precisely all that is there. All that information comes back. Yeah, and so in the way that we're engaging with the larger developers that have their own design and coding systems is we're integrating them with them at the API level. So their software systems that they use to do those functions are able to query from application to application. So that's another way that we can speed things up and make things more efficient. So less transposition, less key punching to be done.
Yeah. Now, what is the, okay, so there's a registry of
Sure.
AHJs.
Mhm.
What, let's look into our crystal ball here. How does this play out in the coming years? How does OrangeButton improve?
Sure.
And other aspects of, you've mentioned sales and operations that
Right.
SunSpec is attacking.
Yep. Well, I'll give you another example that we're working on in real time, is that we're creating a registry of products that would go into a solar energy storage site. And so, imagine, if you will, that okay, you've done the initial sale, you figured out which authority's jurisdiction, and now you're into the design part of it. So you're doing your design on some sort of an automated quoting or CAD system, and then and you're speccing out different parts that you want to use. Now, whoever you are interfacing with as a wholesaler, your design can now, using this product registry, send a query to that wholesaler or the provider of parts to you, and you can get in real time, does that part exist? Is it an obsolete part? Has it been replaced by something else? Is it in inventory, etc.? And so that's where we're headed next. And because and this is of course identifying the correct part. This is a big deal, not only at the point of design and sale, but a few years down the road, right? You need replacement parts. What are the right uh, same kind type of replacements, or like kind replacements, I guess they would call them. And that's what this registry capability gives you. So yeah, there's many other aspects beyond that, but think of all the pieces of data that you might collect on a given system in order to build the system up, including maybe if you're a developer, what crews are available to you, and do they have the right capabilities? Do they have the right I don't know, clearances, licenses, things of that nature to do the work that's being asked for? These are the other aspects that are in this taxonomy, these terms that we built up on the solar industry that will build additional applications to answer those questions.
I mean, this makes me think of the O&M opportunity. Are you suggesting that when a developer comes to us and says, okay, we've got this portfolio of
Sure.
projects, we'd like you to bid doing annual O&M on these solar projects,
Right.
and we could then go into SunSpec and actually get some detailed information about, was it attached versus ballasted, what kind of inverters are there, what kind of solar modules, what kind of racking, all of those details?
Correct. Correct. Now, this is another use case of this OrangeButton taxonomy. It's one that we've explored pretty significantly over the past few years. So, one of the parties that we work with is National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and specifically with Andy Walker, who's head of their O&M practice there. And over the course of the past decade, actually, we've done working with them, we've come up with three versions of best practices in O&M. Those were issued, I believe, in 2-year intervals. And so we might be working on the fourth edition, but we were played a pretty heavy part up through revision 3. And so what we did in that project is to make sure that all the various terms of art in O&M were included in the OrangeButton taxonomy, such that even for different labor tasks that you would do, and again, other fine pieces of data that you need to keep are collected there. We actually produced an application for costing out at a fleet level of doing O&M over a fleet given systems with given characteristics, as you said, if they were ballasted, if they were rooftop, if they were tracked, how they were interconnected, et cetera. All those fine details, which make a difference, of course, to both how you operate and maintain the thing, but of course then the labor that you need and the cost that you need to go service those aspects are all available for you to analyze more or less in real time.
Very cool.
Yep.
Um, I noticed that you have a number of working groups, and tell me more about how those function and why why they exist, and how do ordinary people interact with those working groups.
Sure, sure. Well, ordinary people, I wouldn't say any of the people that interact in our working groups are ordinary. They're all deeply steeped in this distributed energy, renewable energy industry. So that's the defining characteristic. It gets back to SunSpec's reason for being. So we're a nonprofit trade alliance. Our mission is to standardize all the information associated with distributed energy for the purpose of driving down soft costs and increasing innovation. And so all of the work that we do across all the different machine standards and application data exchange standards, they all share that same characteristic. And the way that we're able to achieve those goals is that we have very strong engagement and involvement by SunSpec members on particular topical areas. So for example, we have a cybersecurity group that only works on that. We have a blockchain group, only works on that topic. We have an equipment standard for device interchange that only works on that topic. And of course, we have an O&M work group as well. And so the way that the work groups function is that we bring experts that are on that topic into these work groups, and they volunteer the topics that they believe that the industry needs to work on at that time in order to expand the state of the art. And so what I mentioned in terms of developing national best practices in O&M, that was the direct outcome of a work group. Developing a cost model originally for a single site, again, a direct output of the working group. And then we went back and worked with the DOE to put that cost model on steroids and do it for the fleet. But all the work that was generated in these working groups became sort of that impetus to move it forward. So that's one benefit. But then the other benefit is rubbing elbows with your peers, right? Because you only know about the portfolio that you work with. And the person that's 2 states adjacent to you may have different concerns. And so that's part of increasing the uh, level of education awareness too, is that peer interaction that you get in these SunSpec work groups.
Hmm. And as far as joining the implementers network, what is the cost to the installer?
Sure, that's a great question. Yeah, we have a business model that's a bit confounding to people because everything that we do ultimately gets published royalty free. Every specification, pretty much every piece of code that the work group puts out is goes into open source. And so the short answer is to get engaged. It costs you nothing, right? You go to the website, you download the specs, you can learn all about it there. There's even some videos and so forth that you can pick up on it. If you're a software developer, then you go to the GitHub site. That's where our software repository is for the open source. If you're an end user and you want to sample some of these applications, like ahjregistry.sunspec.org is one. You can just go there and you can use it. So for an installer that might be interested in this AHJ, yeah, please go and do that. It allows you to key punch in specific addresses and you'll get your response back. And you can use it as much as you like. We're introducing it. Now, if you decide that you're going to become a heavier user, and that you're going to be processing, dozens of requests a day or hundreds per month, then yeah, then you should consider joining us and get that premium service and programmatic service.
And but so you're suggesting that I can use the registry gratis?
Absolutely, yeah. Right up until the point where the system goes creek. We put, of course, we put individuals on a quota, right? So if it turns out that you come to our site every day and we're tracking you in our web logs and that we see that you're hitting it a few hundred or maybe a few thousand times a day, we'll
Yeah,
know that and we'll give you a call. But
gotcha.
so long as we keep it to a dull roar, one of the bigger problems I'd say that SunSpec has is just raising awareness for what the issues are and what the potential solutions are. And this is the thing, we get so busy in our day-to-day lives, installing, maintaining, designing, what have you, to look up and say, gee, is there a better, easier way to do this? Some people just forget about that. So to solve that problem, yeah, we let people to come in and try it, kick the tires a little bit, make sure that they understand that it works, and then they can invest.
Yep, makes sense. What else should we talk about, Tom? This is a big
Sure,
topic. I love the orange button, and certainly look forward to learning more about that.
sure. Well, I guess I'd like to raise the conversation up just a notch or two because we're talking about all the nuts and bolts, which is awesome, and this is what you have to do to really nail the problem. But if you look at sort of the bigger picture here, I said that this financing and the cost of sales, this is where the real driver of soft costs is in that. And because there's a lack of transparency on pricing and for what it's going to cost to build a project, but you have to now put yourself into the shoes of the financiers, right? That where they have developers that are bringing projects to them and they're saying, okay, evaluate my project and then you determine what my credit risk is and the credit risk of the off taker and the quality of the parts is and so forth. Yeah, and then put a price in terms of what I'm going to pay for an interest rate. So it's an imprecise art from that standpoint. So what I would argue is that if we could present a standard data set to these financiers so that when 3 developers come in, every one of them is presenting their data in exactly the same way. That's going to create an efficiency in terms of pricing these particular deals. And so that's really sort of the big picture why we're so interested in standardizing this type of data is that on the belief that we can then force the financial markets to say, hey, we're providing you a large volume of project data all the data is presented in a standardized format. So you shouldn't really care so long as we're providing the information, the credit worthiness, the quality, operational performance, etc. If you know that, there should be a standard way that I can go about getting a price for what you're going to charge me for an interest rate for building the system. And so that's uh, the type of market power that developers potentially have if we can coordinate our efforts as a and sing with the common voice to the financiers. So that would be sort of the I would say the big picture call out that I would give to the industry is that, think about what standardization can do for you in those dimensions. It works across other commodities that you're going to buy besides just financing, but that's a good one to pick on just because it's so important to everybody.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of financiers and developers who have their back office process, so to speak, that they consider to be proprietary.
Right.
And so they're not real keen to necessarily talk to others about how they go about their business.
This
Um,
is a classic artifact of a new growing, fast growing market. But you said you stated at the outset, soft costs relative to Germany and Australia and other parts of the world, where they have substantial advantage over us in terms of the cost of an installed lot. I believe it's to the U.S. about maybe $1 more than Germany. At the I'm quoting now at for residential solar, about $1 a watt more, and
yeah.
about a buck and a half, I want to say, more than Australia at this time. And you wonder, well, why is that, right? Australia, the whole market for Australia is what, half the size of California? You think that the U.S. would have way more buying power, and the answer there is that because of what you said, these perceived back office advantages and so forth, where people are not sharing data, uh, that's got to be the reason. That absolutely has to be the reason, is that we don't have a way to efficiently clear deals at the right price for a given quality, and which in Germany and Australia they do. They have a certain path that one can take, that if you meet all these criteria, then you can get financed. Uh,
Mhm.
so so I don't know. We want to do it the American way, free market way, but I'm all in on that. And I think that there's nothing in our way really, except for a will to do this. We have all the tools in the free market to get those same types of efficiencies.
Yeah. So in in the greater scheme of things, though, besides the initiatives that we've discussed so far, are there other things that you're aware of that really need a light shined on them? And you obviously have a good collaboration going with NREL.
Mhm.
Are there initiatives at SEIA on this front that we should highlight, or what else is, you know, in your purview
Mhm.
that we should all be thinking about?
Sure. Well, every one of those organizations that you mentioned has important activities going right now to address soft costs that will make a big difference. One other initiative that's happening at NREL and Sandia is this solar app initiative. And so this directly addresses the residential and small commercial case by putting all of these data sources into a common solar app, and that could then drive design tools and things of that nature. This is being prototyped and piloted by some of the larger developers now, and so the technology is rapidly maturing, and I believe that they'll be adding more users onto that at this time. So that's one thing in the software front that's taking place. Another thing that's taking place is, of course, a much better understanding of how to operate and maintain fleets over time, both technically and as well as from a financial engineering standpoint. So working more in terms of predictive maintenance, also machine learning that's taking place. Certain parts are going to wear out faster than other because of environmental or use conditions and what have you. There's tremendous amounts of work happening in the national labs to this machine learning aspect to look at the wear outs or the use patterns associated with energy storage, with trackers. I mean, these would be two of the pieces with the quote unquote the most moving parts, but inverters and down the line. And those people that are working in those technologies, I would definitely encourage you to engage with your national labs on that topic. SIA, the other similarly situated industry groups, CalSIA again out here in California is another one. Boy, in terms of working with the local regulatory authorities in terms of allowing certain things to occur in a given jurisdiction, this is an important role of influencing that SIA, CalSIA bring to bear. SunSpec, hey, we're more or less sort of a technical expert in this area, but these are the organizations with the loudest mouthpieces to advocate on your behalf. And so just in general, I suggest that you get connected. We're, with as big as this industry is, we're still barely a toddler on the sort of the world scale, and figuring out how the rules of the road work. We're still figuring that out. So learn from your peers, take advantage of that.
Indeed, indeed. And I'm looking forward to SPI being face to face this fall in New Orleans. That will be truly a breath of fresh air to be back to some state of normal in industry and professional meetings.
Hallelujah. It's actually the first trip that I have planned since pandemic started. So, and I'm feeling pretty good about the chances of actually seeing my friends in New Orleans.
Yep. Yep. We will all be inoculated, hopefully, against COVID by that time
Right.
and able to interact fairly normally. So, really looking forward to that.
You got it.
Well, Tom, is there anything else that our listeners should know about what's going on at SunSpec?
Absolutely. This is actually a call to arms, frankly. Cybersecurity for small systems. Right. This is something that's risen to the top of that priority list. It's been noticed that we're selling and installing a lot of solar and energy storage. It's going all throughout the energy grid. Very significant fraction now is coming from that source, and this has been noticed by people all around the world. And so cybersecurity, currently the distributed energy industry is not regulated, and it's time for us to self-regulate and get on top of this because the regulators are coming. So this is it's a simple reality. So if you're not familiar with this concepts of cybersecurity, please learn about it soon. And please understand that as an industry, this is a problem / opportunity that we're absolutely going to take head on so that we can keep the energy markets open, keep prices competitive, and keep this market growing.
Excellent. Well, I want to make a couple of quick announcements, and I'm going to put our website on screen. You can find all of this content at cesnrg.com/podcast and /events. We have a monthly live solar podcast interview. Next Tuesday, we are interviewing Andy Klump with Clean Energy Associates. Really looking forward to having Andy on the show. He's a 20-year veteran of the industry, and we're going to be talking about third-party engineering services, supply chain management, quality assurance, and future trends, um, all regarding how to improve solar and storage project IRR. And we're diving into all of these individual topics on the show with experts like Jim Spano from New Jersey, talking about solar and storage, virtual power plants, and grid resiliency. Mark Kingsley continued our series on solar trackers. He has a ballasted solar tracker at Alliant Energy that is ideal for bifacial solar modules. And then every Wednesday, myself and John Weaver, who is a journalist for PV Magazine, bring you the Clean Power Hour. We're breaking down the latest in renewable energy, solar and storage, and EV news. So check that out at cesnrg.com. Please subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. I want to thank Tom Tansy, the executive director of SunSpec, for coming on the show today. Check them out at sunspec.org. Thank you so much, Tom.